I've just had the absolute honour and privilege of being a juror for the Critics' Choice Award for IndieCup Europe 2024. It was by far the biggest and most intensive sifting of games that I've seen in my time as a juror or a curator or anyone that does anything about games, and it was an absolute pleasure to do. So this is the first of several videos talking about that experience, but also detailing what happened during that process too. We started off with 298 games that were submitted in, and then we had to shortlist them to see who shortlisted what at the end of round one. I started off with a shortlist of 106. They all went on my wish list. It was very expensive. And then after organising them to my top 20, I was then able to then submit that through, as did all of the other jurors. Once all of our shortlists were combined, 11 nominees were then put forward to round two, where we'd put in intensive demo or full game playthroughs of what was available. And this video is talking about those 11 nominees. In no particular order, I'll be starting off with Dreadhunter. Dreadhunter is a fast and fluid shooter RPG that reminds me a little bit of what if something like Disco Elysium was a twin-stick shooter? This felt like that, and your character was fast, fluid, responsive, reactive and dynamic, and so were the enemies that you were being attacked by. And whilst you wandered into various different rooms, different enemies would attack you in different patterns and different styles, and you would need to use some of the furniture in that room to your advantage. Some of it was explodable, some of it would be able to hide some damage for you, for example. And all of the different weapons that you had played and felt differently, and as you upgraded them, those upgrades felt worthwhile and different. And not only were your guns and your secondary weapons upgradable and swap-outable, but also all of your armour added on additional things too, and some of them would have subtle effects, like when you dashed, for example, some missiles would fly out. Beneath all of this was a really detailed upgrade system where you'd be collecting various different parts of scrap, and then you'd pull them all together to then either upgrade or augment all of your different materials, or you could go into the shop in the World Hub and buy totally different things. So it looked like there was an absolute ton of depth there, but this was just so fun and frantic and responsive to play that I was in my element, dashing around all of these tightly woven corridors and rooms filled with monsters and aliens that were out to get me, and it felt just joyful to play. And so a big thumbs up for me was Dreadhunter. The next game on this list is Farewell North, and I've already bought it because it came out on Friday, so I think that kind of says enough about this already. But in Farewell North, you play as both a border collie and its human owner as you discover and explore the Scottish Highlands. And the idea behind this is that everything is drab and miserable and sad, but the border collie can pick up things like flowers, or like it can do things that changes the dynamic of the world and fills it back full of colour and light and brightness and life again, which therefore cheers up your owner because she suffered a loss and is feeling incredibly depressed and sad about it all. The game has two different types of gameplay, and the first one is controlling the border collie, Chelsea, as you run around solving all of these different colour-based puzzles, or like fixing broken walls or doors or frames, or like rebuilding bridges by placing things in the right place to do so. And that feels quite nice and fluid. But the real bit was the fact that you can then control your owner, who then gets into various different canoes, and you go canoeing from island to island across the Scottish seas. And that felt fantastic and really well done, because I was a bit concerned that with the canoeing that you might end up having that feeling a bit stilted or awful. An awful lot of thought has gone into the way how the canoeing controls. I was really impressed with it. So with both sides combined, with beautiful graphics and aesthetics and a sumptuous emotional soundtrack, I was utterly sold with Farewell North, and have been since the first time I played the demo, probably about a year and a half ago now. And so when it came out on Friday, I bought it on day one, and there'll be a review on this channel coming up soon. The next game on this list is called Henry Halfhead, and I adored this. It's by Lulu Entertainment, and it's still in its pre-alpha phase. So it's very early days for this game, but it's on the right track. In Henry Halfhead, you play as Henry the Halfhead, who takes control of every object in the level that you're in so that you can then solve various different tasks. So it might be that you need to butter your morning toast. So then you have to become the knife to slice the bread to then place the toast on the plate. It might be you need to water your plants. So you need to control and become the watering can and then waddle it over and then kind of press the action button to water the plant. It could be you need to change the radio station, or it could be that you need to pack your lunch as it does in the demo that we had available to play. It is so cute, it's so inventive and so playful and interactive, and the fact that you can just go off and there's so many different objects in the demo that we played that have nothing to do with the actual main quests that you're doing, but you just get off to explore and see all the different weird and wonderful things that have been included in the levels. If that level of detail continues throughout the rest of Henry Halfhead as it gets developed, this will be a cult classic that should shift like hundreds of thousands of units. It is superb, easy to play, playful to understand, and just a sandbox of joy that burst out with every single interaction that you had. I couldn't say enough more positivity about Henry Halfhead. It made me gleeful from beginning to end of the demo. The next game on this list sadly does have a NDA, so I can't show you too much about it, but it's called Two Fools, Nishu Takuathsina, and it's a first-person narrative adventure where you play as two different characters, one called Jian, who shipwrecks on a Canadian island in the 17th century, but also you play as Maikan, who is a young Innu hunter trying to uncover what is disturbing his native forest and causing problems and killing his ancestors. And the two stories will collide together, and you flip from chapter to chapter, playing each one of these characters as they explore all of the weird, spooky, supernatural side of stuff, alongside getting to learn a little bit more about the world around them and the different backgrounds that they've had and how that shapes their world. There's lots of choices about what you say to different people in different situations, which then shapes how Jian and Maikan just go through the story and whether some people are on your side or not. And there are also some kind of detective-like parts of the game as well, where you need to explore the environment and spot different clues and environmental clues to therefore progress the story as you go. It moves between an adventure and a survival-y game without survival elements, but it's like that kind of backdrop setting, to moments of horror and having to run away and hide from things. There's also a cute dog in this one too. What is it about games and cute dogs? Stop it. I'm buying them all. But this game has such good production value, from voice acting to the art direction to the soundtrack to the way how the story is just really well developed and told. This will be punching well above its weight for the small team that's involved in developing this, and I can't wait to play Two Fools when it eventually breaks cover, hopefully in Q4 2024. The next game is The Darkest Files, and it's a narrative-driven investigation and court-based game that is made by Paint Bucket Games. I've had my eye on this since I played the demo, funny enough, in a Steam Next Fest last year, and this game is potentially a chef's kiss 10 out of 10 in waiting. The idea behind this is that you're in 1956 and you're a prosecutor in West Germany solving cases from the war. And so you need to go and interrogate suspects, and as you talk to them, you kind of get dragged into their memories and go backwards in time to the war to then kind of investigate through their minds and what they were doing at that time, all the different things that were going on at that time. But you need to kind of balance whether you agree with what the suspect is doing or whether you want to go off on your beaten off the beaten path and kind of like investigate other things on the side that might then help you understand what's true and what's not. Lots of these crime scenes have been abandoned, so you'll be busy exploring different artefacts and examining them, but then going through lots of choice-based dialogue with the different people and suspects and victims that you're trying to get more information from. That then all goes to the reconstruction board, which then lets you like recreate your own version of the crime and see whether or not you got it correct or not. And all of this takes place in a beautifully stylized world that just oozes off the page. And yeah, I'm super excited for this. It plays really well. It lets you get really deep and nuancy, whether you want, well, not whether you want to or not, but I wanted to, because there is so much detail and depth and lore and things to explore, and they could all be red herrings, and I really don't care, because I felt so invested and engrossed in the world that the Darkest Files puts out there in the demo that it's got available, that, yeah, I just didn't want it to end. So a big 2 thumbs up from me. Cannot wait for this to be released. The next game that made the second round of the Critics' Choice Awards was Grunn, and this is a solo developed game by Tom van den Bogart, who you might know from Sock Pop. And I love the Sock Pop series, so great to see them breaking out and doing their own stuff too. Grunn is one of those games where it says it's one thing and it's totally something else, and half the fun, in fact if not all the fun of this game, is then working out what that something else is. Because on the surface it's a gardening game. You're invited to the Dutch countryside and you're told, clear up my garden for me, I'm just away for a bit. The house is off limits, but you should find all of the tools in the shed. And so as you cut the grass and trim the hedges and deadhead the flowers and maybe water some bits and bobs here and there, you start to notice that the world around you is a little eerie, a little quiet, a little creepy, and things start to go bump in the night. And this game transitions from being a gardening game to a horror game very subtly but quickly, all at the same time. I love the vibe of what Grunn was going for, and part of the fun with this was going off and doing your own thing and then stumbling across lots of secrets in plain sight, or meeting your dodgy end if you went into like a back garden corridor that you shouldn't have been in and things like that. And stumbling across multiple different endings is all part of the Grunn fun. My criticism of this game is that the graphics made me feel absolutely seasick, and I get motion sickness in games occasionally. I've never felt so ill so quickly from a first person adventure game ever than what I have with Grunn. I was almost physically sick within 10 minutes, and so I had to keep putting it down and stopping it. But because it was a demo and it restarts whenever you exit out the game, I was like, do you know what, just park it there. I'm going to lay down for 10 minutes, I'll come back. And it totally ruined my appreciation and experience of Grunn whatsoever. So if you don't get motion sickness with a lot of this stuff, like, this is going to be a really interesting and fascinating game to play with lots of psychological horror going on. For me, I'm probably going to pass on this because it made me feel really, really green at the gills. The next game on this list is also under an NDA, so I can only share the trailer, and it's called Phonopolis by Amanita Design. And this was my biggest pleasant surprise, because this game initially didn't make my top 20, but all I'll say is the trailer does not do this game justice, and I adored the demo, and it was my biggest slap myself silly stupid mistake, Simon, that I did throughout all of my sifting in this IndieCup Europe selection process. In Phonopolis, you play as a character that's trapped in this cardboard world, but also evokes a kind of Soviet Union totalitarian model of society, where everything is supposed to be absolutely fantastic, but also you're being totally under the thumb of the government. And so every place in the world has a speaker that's shouting things at you, and that takes over the world and the mind of everyone inside it. So you have to follow orders, because if you don't, then someone just comes along and beats you. As you move through this world, which is built out of cardboard, running at 12 FPS to evoke a stop motion film quality, and there's weird and creaky and strange music from the Floex, the person that does Machinarium and Summer Roast soundtracks. You've got this weird smash up of papercraft and avant-garde worlds colliding in such a fascinating way around point-and-click puzzles. And the interesting thing here is that they've added in these paddles everywhere so that it makes it really obvious what you can and can't do. But because you're in a paper world or a cardboard world, some of the things you can do is actually rip away the world by clicking and dragging with your mouse and ripping back a layer so that you can see things that are hiding underneath. And it was just... there's so much going on in this game, and the trailer just really undersold it. This is a case of go and buy it based on my word alone. If you love weird point and click games, this is going to be an absolute classic. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Next up is a game that is a rhythm narrative game. Yes, there are such things, and it's called Telegraphist 1920 Beats of War. The idea behind this is that you're seeing the Battle of Warsaw through the perspective of someone that is a telegraphist delivering out Morse code actions between commanders and soldiers. And you do this by using your Morse code beats to the music that's going on in each of the levels that you're provided and you're doing. Sometimes you'll need to flick frequencies by spinning around your analog stick, and that will change the radio waves of where you're sending out your commands to, be that one unit or another. And this all interacts together throughout various different pieces of music that felt like they were playing through a gramophone, but also felt quite modern sometimes at the same time. The music kind of confused me slightly as to what this was going for. But with the promise of things like a built-in level editor in the future and lots of other dynamic changing conditions like machines breaking down and things like that as you go on to try and keep you on your toes, this game felt genuinely unique in a genre that quite often does the same thing multiple times and just goes, hey, it's a different song, and that's enough. This brings a unique spin to rhythm action games that I've just never seen before, and for that and that point alone, it deserves a lot of attention. The next game on this list was made by a solo developer, so congratulations Philippe for doing so well, and it's called Gloomy Juncture. And it was really the aesthetic that drew me to this game over everything else, because it's evoking grotesque, horror, psychological, tortured, PS1 chonky polygon graphics. But in the best way. Everything is garish. Like, literally the demo revolves around you trying to clear vomit off the floor from a pub that looks like it's a seedy crack den. It's disgusting, it's grim, it's horrible. And everything is gritty and decaying around you. And so is your mental state. And so that is the fun of what Gloomy Juncture has to offer. It's really well put together and a fully realised world because the voice-acted characters felt interesting. The different puzzles that you were doing took a little while for me to kind of click from a visual perspective what was clickable and what wasn't, because it's a point-and-click adventure game. And some of the things kind of made me go, oh, as stuff kind of popped out and changed in real time in front of my eyes. But it has that kind of film noir, weird, trippy B-movie vibe that I think will do it very well once this gets to a point where it's fully ready for release, at whatever point that may be. But the demo was solid, very enjoyable. It just felt slightly clunky on the control aspect of things and knowing exactly what you could and couldn't click on. But also I think the more you spent time in this world, the more that started to become clear. So I think it just takes some time to get used to what is really an angular and in-your-face, garishly grotesque environment. So yeah, Gloomy Juncture, I think this will have some fans. I've already streamed this on my channel and it's coming up for a full review video too, so I won't spend too long on ODDADA, but this is made by a duo who have put in a experimental musical builder using various different children's toys and interactive environments to create 6 riffs of music or loops of music that you can then interplay and switch on or off or change the volumes, their tone, their reverb, and whether or not they've got like an icy echo on or not throughout various different worlds to then create little mini cassette tapes that you can then play back and store in your cassette box for little musical loops of past, present and future. I adore this game, it's fantastic. I'm going to move on because there's a full video review coming out for it soon. If you're interested in rhythm games though, or music or creative sandbox games, buy it, you won't be upset. The final game that made the IndieCup Europe 2024 Critics' Choice Awards nominees in the second round was Lunar Abyss. And this is a first-person action-adventure horror game that I came in with one expectation and left with a very different one, because I was thinking this is going to be shooty horror, but actually there's far more platforming involved here, and also there's much more to this game that meets the eye from like a world building context. This feels like if Guillermo, I can never say his word, Mr. Del Toro was given lots and lots of millions of pounds and went, go and make a first person shooter horror game. Because it feels like all of the weird and strange B-movie surrealism that comes from a Del Toro film has been shoved into a first person shooter horror game. Like, there's this weird baby face that's trapped in a giant tin can machine. It just starts spewing out babies from its, like, fallopian tubes. It's really weird. But that kind of level of what the hellness just continues throughout enemy design. The way how levels built out kind of feels slightly off-putting, as if you're going through like a mechanical machine that's also alive. It's strange, it's unnerving, it's unsettling, but also incredibly engrossing because the platforming feels precise and fluid and responsive and fast, but also because enemies usually come at you at packs. You usually have to think about 2 or 3 enemies all at once shooting or coming at you from different angles, sometimes from above, from below, or running around corners. You have to be kept on your toes and constantly moving as you try and polish them off, and the shooting didn't feel bad at all. So I came away from Lunar Abyss with a much more positive feeling about it. This wasn't one that initially made my top 20 selection, but I'm really pleased to have played it now, to have kind of gone, I get it now, and I'm really appreciative that I've had this put in front of me to kind of go, this is wishlistable, and it certainly was. All of these games have been put on my wish list, to be fair, and some of them are already out and I've bought them. But I hope that was an interesting dive through the 11 second round nominees that the Critics' Choice Awards nominated for IndieCup Europe 2024. Any comments or questions, leave them down below, and I'll be doing 2 more videos about IndieCup Europe 2024. First one will be around the selection that I liked and just the trailers back to back, so that you get to see all the games that I found out about and loved. And then secondly, there'll be a video for developers around what makes a really good submission, because there was definitely themes about what really stuck out to me as a jury member. And spoiler alert, dumping 3-hour live streams talking about weird mechanics of your game probably doesn't help a juror who's got 298 of them to get through. Thanks for watching.